point. You talk a lot also about loneliness. But can you start by talking about this mental health crisis among youth and the escalating suicide?
But yes. So the New York Times, about 3 weeks ago, as we speak now, had a front-page article in their Sunday edition about a teenager who was on 10 different psychiatric medications. Can you imagine? 10 different psychiatric medications. And there's been articles in the New Yorker and the New York Times within the last 4 or 5 months about the rising tide of childhood suicides. There is a vast increase in the number of children being diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, with anxiety, depression, self-cutting, obsessive compulsive behaviors, and so on. Now, we can make two assumptions. Either there's some accidental, totally unexplainable rise in childhood pathology that has no specific reason whatsoever for its instigation, or we can recognize that we live in a toxic culture that by its very nature affects children's development in such unhealthy ways that children are increasingly mentally unbalanced and desperate to the extent that they're cutting themselves and even trying to kill themselves. So we have to look for those conditions, not in the individual mind or brain or personality of the child or youth. We have to look at them into social conditions that drive children in those directions. And unfortunately, in the public conversation around it, it's all about the pathology and how to treat it, and it's not about the social, cultural causes that are driving children in those desperate directions.
So can you talk about how you view this and how this, not just this country, the world can heal, especially focusing on youth?
Well, we need to begin right at the beginning. And the beginning is actually in the womb. Now, we already know from multiple studies, not even controversial, that the more stress there is on pregnant women, the greater the impact, even decades later, on the well-being of the infant. So how are we looking after pregnant women? The average physician, I mean, I was trained as a medical doctor. To this day, the average physician, when they're trained in prenatal care, they're not trained to ask about the woman's emotional states. They're not trained to ask about, how are you doing? How's your relationship? How's your work stress? What can we do to support you? We only look after the body, and we separate the mind from the body. We know that stresses on the woman can already have an impact on the infant. Then there's our birth practices. In North America now, the cesarean section rate is approaching 40%. Now, modern obstetrics is miraculous in its capacity to save lives, and it should be applied about 10 to 15% of cases for the benefit of the infant or the mother. But a 40% C-section rate and the mechanization of birth, natural birth as evolved by nature was designed to produce a bonding experience for mother and infant, including the release of bonding chemicals that will bring them together for a lifelong relationship. When we medicalize birth, we interfere with it, we mechanize it, we create fear around it. We're actually interfering with the mother-child bond on which the child's healthy development develops. Then, in the United States, 25% of women have to go back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth. Now, nature would have that mom be with the child for at least 9 months, usually longer if you look at it historically. 25% of women having to go back to work for economic reasons, for lack of social support, amounts to a massive abandonment of infants, because that's how the infants experience it. That's the only way they can interpret it, just the way I interpreted my mother's giving me to a stranger as an abandonment. Then there's the child-rearing practices that I've already mentioned, of not picking up children when they're crying, of parents being so stressed that their stresses are absorbed by the infant, that the parents' economic, racial, social anxieties, relational anxieties, their own unresolved trauma are absorbed by the infants. Then there's parenting practices that focus on trying to control the child's behavior without in any way trying to meet the child's needs. The human child is born with certain needs for unconditional loving acceptance, for being held, for the capacity to experience all their emotions with parental support. In this society, those needs are denied over and over and over again. And most of our children spend most of their time away from their parents, so they lose the connection with the parent. Do we wonder then that the child's circuits of anxiety and panic in the brain are activated and extra overactivated? These are natural consequences of an unnatural culture.